She had never even kissed a man, let alone seduced one. But $5 million, that was the kind of money that made you forget your morals real fast. Elena Ramos sat in the back seat of a sleek black car, her palms sweating despite the freezing, air blasting through the vents. She looked out the tinted window, watching the golden towers of Manhattan flash by. The closer they got to the Kincaid Corporation's headquarters, the more her heart thudded like a drumline. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't the type. She worked part-time at a bookstore, wore second-hand clothes, and spent her nights watching documentaries with her cat. She had a quiet life. Lonely, maybe, but honest. That was until Miranda Harrington, the billionaire heiress with too much pride and a broken engagement, showed up at her door with a proposal that sounded like something straight out of a soap opera. Stop the wedding. Seduce him. Make him. Call it off. And I'll pay you $5 million, Miranda had said, in her glassy voice and perfect posture. Like this was just another boardroom deal. Elena should have slammed the door. Instead, she asked, "Why me?" "Because you're his type, innocent, real, not like the vultures he's used to. He'll believe everything you say. He won't see it coming." And she'd handed Elena a file. A full damn dossier on Dominic Kincaid, the powerful CEO of Kincaid Corp, 32 years old. Cold, richer than God, and engaged to someone he didn't love, according to Miranda. A merger more than a marriage. "I just need a few weeks," Miranda had added, lighting a cigarette like she was closing a hit job. "Get close, make him second guess, I'll handle the rest." Now here Elena was, stepping into the lion's den in heels that felt like stilts, with a fake resume, a new look, and a mission that made her feel sick. The building was glass and steel, like a monument to power. She clutched her purse tighter as she walked through the revolving doors, pretending to belong. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, eyeing her up and down. "Elena Rivera. I have an interview for the executive assistant position." A few clicks, a polite smile. "Take the elevator to the 45th floor. Mr. Kincaid will see you himself." Her stomach dropped. He was doing the interview. The ride up felt like an eternity. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped out into a quiet, minimalist hallway. A man in a suit gestured to a large office at the end. "He's ready for you." She nodded and walked slowly, every step echoing in her ears. The double doors opened, and there he was, Dominic Kincaid, tall, sharp-jawed, eyes like storm clouds. He stood behind a marble desk, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a crystal glass of something dark. He looked up, and for a second his gaze held hers like a hook. "Elena Rivera," he said. Not a question, just a cool statement. "Sit." She sat, knees weak. He studied her like a puzzle. "Your background's impressive, but I don't care about resumes. Why do you want this job?" Lie. Lie well, she told herself. "I need a new start. I want to prove myself." He raised an eyebrow. "You want to work for me, or be around me?" Her throat caught. He smirked like he already knew something. "Don't worry. I like ambition. But just so you know, I don't tolerate dishonesty." She smiled shakily. "Neither do I." He leaned back, eyes never leaving hers. "You're hired." Just like that. The trap was set. But what Elena didn't know was that Dominic already suspected something, and he had plans of his own. Elena barely slept that night. Her mind kept replaying every moment of the interview. His voice, the way he looked at her like he already knew she was lying, and worst of all, the way her stomach fluttered when he smiled. She couldn't afford to be distracted by him. Not when $5 million were dangling in front of her face. This wasn't about feelings. This was about finishing the job. Her new ID badge glinted in the morning light as she walked through the lobby the next day. Executive assistant to Mr. Kincaid. Just seeing that made her stomach twist. It sounded powerful, but she felt like a fraud wrapped in expensive perfume. She was escorted straight to the top floor, where Dominic's office looked more like a penthouse than a workplace. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a skyline view, and a tension in the air that wrapped itself around her throat. "You're 5 minutes early," Dominic said, not looking up from the tablet in his hand. "Is that bad?" His lips twitched. I prefer people who are eager. Sit. She sat. For a second there was only silence. Then he tossed her a thick folder. You'll manage my calendar, my meetings, and my public appearances. You'll also be dealing with personal tasks, and I don't like repeating myself. Can you handle that? She nodded. Yes, sir. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing at the word, sir. I like that, he murmured, almost to himself. Elena's cheeks flushed, but she kept her face straight. This was just part of the game. Seduce, distract, destroy the wedding. 5 million. Except she hadn't counted on him being this intense or this observant. By noon, she'd made her first mistake. She brought him a coffee, wrong kind, too much sugar. I don't do sweet, he said, placing the untouched cup down like it insulted him. No problem, she replied quickly, snatching it away. He raised an eyebrow. Most people apologize. She forced a smile. I'm not most people. For a moment, silence again. Then he actually laughed. A short, low chuckle. You're interesting, he said. That wasn't in the script. By the end of the day, her nerves were completely shot. She went to the restroom and stared at herself in the mirror. Her eyes looked different. There was a flicker of guilt hiding behind the foundation. She didn't like lying. She didn't like pretending to be someone else. But she needed that money. Desperately. Rent was due. Her mum's medical bills were stacking up. Her little sister needed help. She wasn't doing this for greed. She was doing it to survive. Still, her hands trembled when she thought about what would happen when Dominic found out. Because, deep down, she already knew one thing for sure. This man wasn't going to take betrayal lightly. Later that evening, as she packed up her things, Dominic appeared at her desk. So you're coming with me tonight, he said flatly. What? Her voice cracked. Fundraiser event. You're on the list. My fiancé bailed. She blinked. You want me to go with you? As your date? He leaned in slightly, eyes scanning hers. Let's not call it that. Let's just say I like seeing how people react when you walk into a room. She swallowed hard. Be ready by 8. Dress like you mean it. And then he was gone, like a storm that never stayed long enough to explain itself. She stood, frozen, heart hammering. This was moving fast. Too fast. But maybe it was working. The problem was, she wasn't sure anymore who was playing who. Elena had never worn anything like it before. The red dress clung to her body like it was stitched from sin itself. Low back, high slit, barely there straps. She looked like someone else entirely. Confident, bold, dangerous. The kind of woman who could ruin a man without even touching him. She stood in front of the penthouse mirror, clutching the tiny purse Miranda had sent over with the dress, the heels and a soft warning, make him forget every reason he ever wanted to marry her. At exactly 8 p.m., a sleek black car pulled up outside her building. The driver didn't speak as she slid into the back seat. She didn't need directions. She already knew where they were going. The Langmore Hotel, a luxury playground for the rich and powerful. Tonight, Dominic Kincaid was hosting a fundraiser for one of his so-called global causes. Cameras, celebrities, old money, the works. And she was walking in on his arm. When she stepped out of the car, cameras flashed like lightning. She froze. Then he appeared. Dominic, in a black suit that probably cost more than her entire life. Savings walked toward her like he owned the night. His eyes traveled from her heels to her lips, and something cold and sharp flickered in them. Approval, maybe, or something darker. You clean up well, he murmured, offering his arm. She took it, her hand trembling just slightly. Try not to look so terrified, he added, as they entered the ballroom. They can smell weakness. Inside it was all crystal chandeliers, champagne, and fake smiles. Elena felt out of place immediately, a lamb in a den of well-dressed wolves, but Dominic never let go of her arm. In fact, he kept her close, possessively, like she was his. Who's your date, Dominic? Someone asked, an older man with shark eyes and a too-smooth voice. A surprise, Dominic said smoothly, even to me. Elena smiled politely, playing her part, but something in his voice made her skin prickle. She couldn't tell if he was mocking her or warning everyone else. As the night went on, she watched him work the room like a king among pawns. Cold, polite, in control. But every so often, his hand would graze her back, just enough to make her heart race. He never looked at her for too long. But when he did, it was like he was reading every lie off her skin. Halfway through the night, while pretending to sip champagne, Elena spotted someone across the room who made her heart skip. Miranda, standing alone, watching her. Smiling slightly. She didn't come over, she didn't have to. The message was clear. Keep going. Elena turned away, her chest tightening. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was becoming dangerous. Just then, Dominic leaned down to her ear. Smile a little. People are starting to wonder if I kidnapped you. She forced a laugh, looking up at him. Maybe you did. His eyes darkened just slightly. If I did, you wouldn't want to escape. She didn't know if it was a warning or a promise. A few songs later, the string quartet began a slow, elegant waltz. Dominic turned to her. Dance with me. I don't really... He didn't wait. He took her hand and led her to the floor like he'd already decided. The moment they started moving, it felt like the room vanished. Just the two of them. His hand on her waist, firm and steady. His breath near her temple, her heart slamming in her chest. You're nervous, he said quietly. She looked up. Maybe. Why? She hesitated. Because I don't know what you want from me. He smiled, faint but dangerous. That's the thing, Elena. I'm still trying to figure out what you want from me. Her breath caught. He spun her, and when she returned to his arms, something had changed in his expression. Less playful, more calculating. Then he leaned, in, lips close to her ear. My fiancé's watching us right now, so whatever game you think you're playing... He paused. Just know I'm playing it better. Elena barely slept after the fundraiser. Her mind was spinning with questions. That last sentence from Dominic, I'm playing it better, echoed like a curse in her ears. Did he know? Was he bluffing? Or was he just toying with her, like a cat that liked to watch its prey twitch before the final strike? By morning, she was back in his office, dressed in her neat assistant attire, typing up emails with shaking fingers and a twisted stomach. Dominic hadn't said a word about last night, not the dance, not the kiss on her cheek he'd left in front of half the boardroom, not even the way his fiancée had stormed out minutes after. It was like it had never happened. At exactly 10 a.m., he called her in. Elena, he said without looking up, clear my afternoon, cancel the Merivale lunch and the brand call. We're going somewhere. Where? He finally looked at her. You'll see. She swallowed and nodded, ignoring the growing dread in her chest. By noon, they were in a helicopter. No warning, no explanation. Just him sitting cool and composed beside her like dragging his assistant into the clouds was a normal Wednesday. Do you enjoy surprises? He asked over the headset. Not particularly. Good. Keeps your reactions honest. He said things like that a lot, just enough to make her doubt everything she said, everything she felt. He knew how to twist words like knives, and yet, somehow, she couldn't look away from him. They landed on a cliffside estate overlooking the ocean, all glass walls and white stone. Remote, private, expensive. Definitely not the kind of place a man brings his assistant. Is this one of your homes? She asked. One of 5, he replied casually, but this one's special. She raised an eyebrow. Why? He looked at her then, straight into her eyes. It's where I figure people out. The words hit like a slap. Inside it was silent except for the ocean's roar beyond the windows. No staff, no distractions. Just her and Dominic walking side by side down an endless hallway. He stopped in front of a room and opened the door. Go on. It's yours for the night. She stepped inside slowly. It was beautiful, simple, but rich. A bed like a cloud, a view that stole her breath, and on the table, a red box. She turned to ask what it was, but he was already gone. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a dress, midnight blue, silk, backless with a note. Dinner, 8 p.m. no lies. She stared at the words for a long time. That night, she wore the dress. She had to. The money was still on the line. The job wasn't done. Dominic Kincaid still had a wedding to call off, and she still had a part to play. He was waiting for her in the dining room, a private chef setting down plates and vanishing without a word. Candles, wine, a table meant for seduction or interrogation. "You look," he paused, letting his eyes travel. "Different." "You keep saying that," she said as she sat, "because I still haven't figured out which version is real." They ate in silence for a while, tension thick in the air like perfume. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Tell me something true, Elena." She blinked. "Like what?" "Anything. Something real. Not rehearsed." She hesitated. "I have a little sister. She's 12. I help raise her." He nodded. "That's better." "Then," he said, "my mother died when I was 10. My father raised me like a soldier, cold, ruthless, no room for failure." There was no emotion in his voice, just facts like steel. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked softly. "Because you're here for a reason, and I want to know if it's worth burning everything down to find out what it is." Her stomach dropped, her mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" Dominic stood, walked to her side and leaned down beside her ear. "It means," he whispered, "I know someone sent you." Elena froze. "And I'm giving you one chance, just one, to tell me who." Elena felt like the air had vanished from the room. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, eyes wide. Dominic didn't move. He stayed right there, close enough for her to smell the faint trace of his cologne, expensive and dark, the kind of scent that lingers after the damage is already done. "Wrong answer," he murmured, then stepped back. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. That made it worse. "I don't like being lied to, Elena. Especially not in my own house." She stood up, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm not lying." He gave a slow, humorless smile. "You're not a professional liar. That's what makes this fun." "Why are you playing games with me then?" she snapped, suddenly angry, the pressure breaking through her calm. "If you think I'm lying, why did you bring me here? Why not fire me? Why not just end it?" He paused, then said something that almost knocked her over. "Because I want to see how far you'll go." She stared at him. He was serious, dead serious. "You're testing me. I'm watching you," he said, "and so far, I'm not impressed." The words burned, maybe because a part of her wasn't acting anymore. Somewhere along the way, the lines had started to blur. She didn't know when it happened, but she was no longer pretending to be nervous around him, no longer pretending to be impressed, intimidated, drawn to him. It was real. That's what scared her. "I should go," she said quietly. Dominic stepped aside. Doors open. But she didn't move, and neither did he. Instead, he poured another glass of wine and took a slow sip, never breaking eye contact. "Eleanor, whoever sent you, they're using you. They think I'll be distracted by a pretty face, that I'll drop my guard." His voice dropped lower, colder. "What they don't understand is, I don't have a guard. I am the weapon." She swallowed hard, heart pounding. He set the glass down. "If you want to walk away, do it now. You can lie, you can pretend. But once I find out the truth, and I will, there's no going back." The silence between them was a blade, sharp, waiting to cut. Elena didn't know what to do. Tell the truth? And what? Miranda would destroy her. Take back the money. Or worse, make her disappear. No, not yet. "I told you the truth," she lied, eyes glistening. "I came here for a job, that's all." Dominic looked at her for a long time. So long she felt naked in his gaze. Finally he nodded slowly. "All right." She blinked. "What?" "If that's the story you're sticking with," he said coolly, "then we'll play it your way." The next morning, everything changed. Her email access was cut. Her desk was moved out of his office. She wasn't allowed to bring him coffee, manage his schedule, or even see him without being summoned. She'd been demoted, not on paper, but in power. She'd gone from insider to ghost overnight. Miranda called that afternoon. "Well?" she asked, voice sharp. "He hasn't called off the wedding yet." "He's suspicious," Elena whispered, pacing outside the building. "He knows someone's behind this. He's pushing me out." Miranda sighed. "Then you're not being convincing enough. Get closer, cry, flirt. Sleep with him if you have to." Elena froze. "I didn't agree to that," she said, anger rising in her chest. "You agreed to $5 million, Miranda snapped. "And I don't care what it takes. Dominic Kincaid is not marrying that woman." Then the call ended. Eleanor stood there, phone shaking in her hand. She felt cheap, used, cornered. And yet, part of her still didn't want to walk away. Not because of the money, not because of Miranda, because she wasn't done with him, because deep down, she still wanted to know what would happen if she got past his walls, if she could really break the unbreakable, or if in the end, he'd be the one to destroy her. 3 days passed. 3 long, cold days where Elena felt like she didn't exist. She still showed up, still sat at her new desk in the corner near the executive conference room, still waited for Dominic to acknowledge her. He never did. Not a glance, not a word, not a single sign he remembered she even existed. It was like she'd been erased from his world, and yet, every now and then, she'd catch the security team watching, her just a little too closely, or her emails would suddenly log out on their own. Her calls would drop halfway through. It was subtle, but she felt it. He was testing her, or trapping her, or maybe both. That morning she arrived early, as always, but when she reached her desk, a white envelope sat on her keyboard. No name, just her. Inside, a single line in black ink. "Room 1407, be there at midnight, come alone." Her heart leapt into her throat. She checked the building layout. Room 1407 wasn't an office. It was a private suite, one of several at the top of the Kincaid building reserved for high-profile guests, elite clients, and Dominic himself. This wasn't a business meeting. It was something else. She almost didn't go. Almost. But at 11:58 p.m., she stepped out of the elevator on the 14th floor, heart pounding like a war drum, palms slick with sweat. The hallway was dark, silent. She walked slowly until she reached 1407, and knocked. The door opened instantly. He stood there, shirt unbuttoned, tie loose around his neck, a drink in one hand. No smile. "Eleanor," her voice caught. "You asked me to come." "No. I invited you," he said, stepping aside. "Big difference." She walked in slowly. The room was dimly lit, quiet, drenched in tension. No cameras, no assistants, no guards, just them. He walked to the bar, poured her a drink. "You look scared." "I'm not." "Liar," he said, handing her the glass. "But you're here. That counts for something." She didn't drink, just held the glass, trying to steady her voice. "Why did you bring me here?" Dominic leaned against the bar, watching her like a hunter who'd already set the trap. "Because I wanted to look at you without pretending. I don't see through you." Elena flinched. "You think you know me." "No," he said quietly. "I know there's something you're not telling me, and I'm tired of playing polite." He walked closer, step by step, until he was right in front of her. "Here's what I think," he whispered. "I think you were sent. I think someone wants to break this wedding, and they thought you'd be the perfect tool, sweet, soft, unthreatening." He reached up and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, gently, too gently. "But you don't lie like someone trained to deceive. You lie like someone who's desperate." Her throat closed. He leaned in, eyes boring into hers. "So tell me, Elena, who's pulling your strings?" She didn't answer, couldn't. If she told him, Miranda would ruin her. If she kept lying, Dominic would destroy her. Either way, she was standing on a cliff. He stepped back, watching her carefully. "Still nothing?" he asked. Elena met his gaze, trembling. "Why do you care so much?" His voice turned ice. "Because I don't like being manipulated, and I don't like people trying to use me to fight their wars." Then softer, dangerously soft. "But mostly because you made me want to believe you." The room went quiet. He turned away, heading toward the window. I was going to marry her, you know. Not for love, for power, legacy, control. Eleanor's heart cracked. But lately, he added, I've been wondering if someone like you, someone real, is worth burning it all down. She opened her mouth, then stopped, because in that second, she knew this wasn't a game anymore, not for him, and not for her. But just as she took a step forward, the hotel phone rang. One sharp, urgent ring. Dominic answered, voice calm, then he froze. His eyes flicked to Elena. She's what? He asked quietly. A pause. And then, find her. Don't let her leave the building. He slammed the phone down. What's wrong? Eleanor asked, her chest tightening. Dominic's eyes burned into hers. Miranda's here. Eleanor didn't realize how fast her hands were shaking until the glass slipped from her grip and shattered on the floor. Miranda. Here. She hadn't seen her since that fundraiser, hadn't spoken to her except through those cold, clipped phone calls, and now she was in the same building as Dominic. This was bad. Dominic's jaw was tight, his voice low and furious. She used you as bait, and now she's come to collect. Elena took a shaky step back. I didn't ask for this. I didn't even know she was coming. I know, he muttered, eyes still storming. That's the only reason I haven't thrown you out of this building yet. Before she could answer, Dominic was already moving. Fast, smooth, like a man ready for war. He hit a button on the wall and spoke into a hidden intercom. Lock the penthouse elevators. I want Harrington off the premises in 10 minutes. A voice crackled back. Sir, she's already in the lobby. She's demanding to come up. Tell her. But then the elevator dinged. Too late. The doors slid open, and in stepped Miranda Harrington, wrapped in a white fur coat, heels clicking like gunshots, and a smile on her face that could kill a man slowly. Well, well, she said, stepping into the room like she owned it. What? A cozy little scene. Dominic turned to face her, arms crossed, cold and unreadable. Miranda, to what do I owe the intrusion? Miranda peeled off her coat and tossed it over the back of the couch, revealing a slim silver dress and a smirk full of poison. You've been ignoring my calls. I figured I'd come remind you what we had planned. You know, before this little Cinderella decided to play house in your penthouse. Eleanor froze. Dominic didn't flinch. The wedding's on hold. Miranda's smile tightened, like someone twisting the stem of a wine glass too hard. Oh, it is. Funny, because the press doesn't know that. The investors don't know that, and my father certainly doesn't know that. I don't answer to your father. No, Dominic, Miranda said, her voice snapping like glass. You answer to power. You built this company with one hand tied behind your back. Do you really think she's going to help you keep it? She turned toward Elena with slow disgust, like she was studying a stain. $5 million for a virgin with a fake resume and a shaky smile. What a bargain. Elena's face went white. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Dominic's head turned slowly. $5 million? Miranda laughed. Oh, come on, you really didn't know. She looked back at Elena, eyes like ice. You didn't tell him. All this time, all this touching, the staring, the innocent act. And you didn't tell him the one thing he needed to know. Stop, Elena whispered, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. Dominic stepped forward. Is it true? She couldn't answer, couldn't move. Elena. His voice cracked like thunder. Is it true? Yes, she whispered finally, but not like you think. Dominic's face went still, empty. No anger, no pain, just nothing. And that scared her more than anything. I needed the money, she whispered. My sister. My mom. I didn't come to hurt you, I swear, Dominic. I didn't know. I'd feel, he repeated softly. Elena stepped closer. This started as a lie, but it became real. He looked at her like she was a stranger. And then he laughed, once, hollow. Do you even know what you've done? Eleanor tried to speak, but Miranda cut in, voice sharp. She did what I paid her to do. She broke you, and you let her. Dominic turned away, walked to the window, hands clenched. Miranda moved to his side. Now if you're smart, you'll fix this. Call the press, announce the wedding, come back to reality. But he didn't speak, didn't look at either of them, then finally, cold and low, both of you, out. Dominic, get out, he snapped, his voice like a whip. Elena flinched. Miranda didn't. Instead, she gave Elena one last glance, dripping in smug victory. I told you, she whispered, brushing past. Men like him don't fall. For girls like you, they use you, and then they walk away. She left. And for the first time since this game began, Eleanor was alone, truly alone. Eleanor didn't go home that night. She couldn't. She wandered the city for hours, heels in her hand, the cold biting at her skin, mascara smudged beneath. Her eyes. Her chest felt hollow, like something had been torn out, and she hadn't realized how deep it went until it was too late. She had told herself this wouldn't matter, that he was just another assignment, that it was just money. But she had lied to herself harder than she'd lied to Dominic, and now it was over. By morning, her name was locked out of every Kincaid system, her badge deactivated, her final paycheck sent through without so much as a note. It was Miranda's. People who reached out last and cold, robotic, letting her know the money had been wired, every cent of it. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like blood money. She never touched it. She rented a room in Queens, started temp work. Again, nothing glamorous, just enough to scrape by. She cut her hair, changed her number, disappeared. Weeks passed. Winter thickened, and the news of Dominic's postponed wedding slipped quietly from the headlines. Rumors flew, infidelity, boardroom wars, cold feet, but no one ever mentioned Elena. She'd been erased from his narrative, just like he'd promised. Then one night, nearly 6 weeks later, she walked into a bookstore just to kill time. And there he was, Dominic, standing in the corner, flipping through a hardcover. No suit, no guards, no power armor. Just jeans, a wool coat, and that same unreadable face. She froze. He looked up, saw her, and for a long, heavy moment, neither of them moved. She thought about running, thought about pretending she didn't see him, but something in his eyes stopped her. Not anger, not hate, something else. He walked over slowly, no smile, no sharp edge, just silence. Elena. Her name in his voice still hit like thunder. She swallowed. Dominic. Another long pause. Why are you here? She whispered. I could ask. You the same. She smiled sadly, trying to be invisible. Not doing a great job. They stood there in the quiet between the shelves, everything that had been left unsaid wrapped around them like smoke. I never spent the money, she said quietly. I couldn't. He nodded like he already knew. I wasn't supposed to feel anything, she added. I swear to you, it started as a lie, but it didn't end like one. Dominic's jaw flexed. You broke something in me. She looked down. I know. And yet, he added, voice softer now, I still couldn't forget your face. Even after everything, she looked up, heart aching. Why? He stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of him in the cold. Because no one's ever lied to me and made me wish it had been real. She didn't breathe. I don't trust easily, he said. You know that, and maybe I'll never trust you again. But if you were brave enough to tell me the truth when it could have saved you to lie. He paused. Maybe that means something. She blinked, tears rising. What are you saying? Dominic exhaled. I'm saying if you want a second chance, not with a job, not with the money, with me, no games, no contracts, no $5 million schemes. His voice dipped lower. Just you. Elena's lips trembled. And then she did the one thing she hadn't done since this entire mess began. She stepped forward and kissed him. Not to seduce, not to trick, just to tell the truth, with her lips, with her heart. And when they finally pulled apart, Dominic smiled, Faye, for real this time. Let's write our own ending, he whispered. And this time it wasn't a deal. It was a beginning.